What happens when the world's most powerful military alliance realizes that the future of war may belong not to billion-dollar aircraft, but to thousands of expendable machines? For decades, NATO has prepared to stop armies built around tanks, submarines, fighter jets, ballistic missiles, and the ever-present shadow of nuclear deterrence. But as we've recently witnessed, small, surprisingly inexpensive drones can now locate artillery, attack armored vehicles, overwhelm traditional air defenses, and entirely reshape the economics of warfare. You're watching a TechClips 46 Explainer, and today we're investigating a central, defining question. Is NATO's newly announced multi-billion-dollar expansion into drone technology a genuine military revolution, or is it simply an incredibly expensive attempt to catch up with a battlefield that has already irrevocably changed?
So, let's examine this stark reality. What exactly does the world's most powerful military alliance do when its traditional, highly expensive weapons face a fraction of the cost threat? Historically, Western military supremacy has relied heavily on what defense analysts call few and exquisite platforms. We're talking about state-of-the-art fighter jets, colossal aircraft carrier strike groups, and incredibly advanced main battle tanks. Now, these are absolute marvels of human engineering, but they're also scarce. They take years to build, and they are incredibly difficult to replace in the heat of an extended conflict. The modern battlefield, however, is being rapidly shaped by commercial quadcopters, autonomous systems, software-defined command networks, and electronic warfare. Suddenly, the exquisite is highly vulnerable to the expendable.
And we're witnessing a really profound tension here between NATO's Cold War-era reliance on massive, costly platforms and the new reality of cheap, disposable robotic systems that are currently dominating modern conflicts. When you think about legacy hardware, you're looking at systems that require massive supply chains, years of specialized training, and immense financial investment. On the other side of that equation are modern threats like first-person view, or FPV, attack drones, long-range one-way loitering munitions, and AI-assisted swarms. These systems are modular. They heavily rely on commercial supply chains, and crucially, they can be updated with new software literally overnight. As defense experts point out, this creates a really dangerous mindset, where a military might be forced to fight with what it has, like dropping expensive JBUs from expensive F-35s, instead of what it actually needs to counter a highly adaptable asymmetric threat.
Let's dive right into Section 1, the new robotic battlefield.
To truly understand this paradigm shift, we have to look at the economic danger of the cost exchange trap. Drone warfare is rapidly becoming a financial contest. Just imagine the sheer financial bleed of a defender who has to launch a highly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar interceptor missile just to destroy a hostile drone that was slapped together from commercial parts for a few $1,000s. It's totally unsustainable. Defenders risk going absolutely bankrupt, burning through immense amounts of taxpayer money by wasting their exquisite air defenses on cheap, off-the-shelf quadcopters or long-range one-way attack drones. If an adversary can just force a technologically superior military to deplete its high-end interceptors on low-end decoys, well, they've successfully exploited the current system, and they've brought the confrontation to a level that is incredibly unfavorable for the defending nation.
And this isn't just theoretical, it's a confirmed reality. As NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte acknowledged at the recent Defense Industry Summit in Ankara, drones have fundamentally altered the character of modern warfare. They've become a decisive factor. Ukraine's success in strapping explosives to commercial drones to destroy heavy armor or launching long-range systems to strike refineries 1,500 miles deep behind enemy lines, that proved that these systems are an incredible equalizing factor against a technically larger threat. NATO, and frankly the rest of the world, has been taking intense notes. The alliance realized that it couldn't just sit back and admire that ingenuity. It needed to fundamentally overhaul its own strategic posture to maintain global security.
Which brings us to Section 2, NATO's $40 billion plan.
NATO's multi-pronged response to this is the Drone Edge Initiative, backed by a massive $40 billion figure. But we really need to be precise here so we understand what this actually means. This $40 billion represents a combined, multi-year allied investment specifically dedicated to building robust counter-drone capabilities over the next 5 years. It's not a single, centralized NATO procurement contract cut from one giant budget. Instead, it's a coordinated political commitment by member states to rapidly expand their ability to deploy, operate, and defend against unmanned systems at scale. Essentially, it is a massive financial signal to the defense industry that the alliance is pivoting hard into robotic and counter-robotic warfare.
To rapidly scale this up, member states aren't just buying hardware off the shelf. They're aggressively overhauling their entire operational ecosystem. The Drone Edge Initiative has some incredibly ambitious confirmed targets. First, they aim to train 5 times more military drone operators by the end of 2027. Second, they're establishing a dedicated counter-drone procurement marketplace run through the NATO Support and Procurement Agency to speed up the acquisition of counter-UAS technologies. Furthermore, they're expanding the NATO Flight Training Europe project. Finland, France, and Sweden recently joined, which brings the total to 20 participating nations supported by 16 flight training centers. They're actively trying to build what Ruta calls a completely drone-ready alliance.
Moving on to Section 3, Scaling Up Drone Manufacturing.
Because aggressively buying technology doesn't mean much if the industrial base cannot physically build it fast enough. As Martin Carcour of Quantum Systems perfectly captures, combat power does not begin on the battlefield. It begins in trusted factories. Armed forces can only fight at the speed their industrial partners can produce, adapt, and sustain. In a robotic war, the attrition rates are just staggering. We're talking about losing hundreds, sometimes thousands of drones a month. Because of this, defense companies are frantically shifting away from slow, highly centralized production models in favor of resilient, distributed supply chains. The stark realization here is that lowest-price component sourcing from potential adversaries is an incredibly expensive strategic risk. Sovereign, or at least Allied-controlled, manufacturing is now viewed as an absolutely critical component of national security. Let's look at how this builds out in practice. Companies like Quantum Systems are actively establishing new manufacturing hubs across NATO's footprint. Their operational philosophy is pretty simple: deliver, support, integrate. They're expanding out of Germany and California to build new facilities in places like Huntsville, Alabama, as well as sites in the UK and, crucially, right along NATO's eastern flank in Lithuania, Estonia, and Romania. By integrating directly into national economies, they can scale production locally. The ultimate goal is to translate operational demand into reliable delivery in a matter of months, not the years or even decades it typically takes to procure those legacy defense platforms.
That takes us to Section 4, Surveillance and the Triton.
Now, beyond the small tactical units, NATO's also investing heavily in the much higher end of the drone spectrum. The alliance recently announced the planned purchase of up to 5 MQ-4C Triton unmanned aerial vehicles, an effort led by Denmark, Finland, Germany, and Norway. The Triton is a high-altitude, long-endurance system that will join NATO's Allied-owned ISR force based in Italy. This is the vital strategic move to reduce European reliance on U.S. surveillance capabilities, which has been a long-standing goal for both American and NATO leadership. However, defense analysts are pointing out a valid concern. While the Triton is fantastic for peacetime maritime surveillance, an equal buy of medium-altitude MQ-9Bs is also urgently recommended. Why? Because the MQ-9B offers distinctive capabilities that are much more useful in wartime, including missile strikes and air-launched effects, providing the alliance with the lethal flexibility it would desperately need in an active conflict.
But here's the stark reality. As NATO nations prepare to invest billions in high-dollar aircraft, they have to simultaneously solve a massive human capital shortage. Hardware isn't the only hurdle here. The uncomfortable truth is that NATO's ISR force in Sigonella has historically been severely undermanned. We're talking about operating at only about 60% of its 600-person authorized strength simply because member states did not send enough support personnel. With too few people to fly, upkeep, and actually analyze the massive amounts of data collected by these drones, the force averaged only 1 flight per week, which is way below its true capacity. Without the military personnel to operate them, these incredible machines are just really expensive museum pieces.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, where things get incredibly intense: AI, autonomy, and ethics. As this hardware scales up to operate at machine speed, we face an incredibly complex, often overlapping web of international efforts attempting to govern military AI. You've got the NATO Data and AI Review Board, UN initiatives, and various national declarations all grappling with the exact same issue. Look, the introduction of new military technologies has always had significant strategic consequences, but AI is just fundamentally different. It touches on the very core of command and control. Current capabilities already offer a technological God's eye view of the battle space. But as we delegate more autonomy to these systems, we require an artificial intelligence that can coordinate multiple, modular systems simultaneously. And governing that immense, lightning-fast cognitive power requires rigorous, foolproof standard setting.
To that end, NATO is attempting to anchor its robotic warfare in 6 ethical principles, which are outlined in their revised AI strategy: lawfulness, responsibility, explainability, reliability, governability, and bias mitigation. These aren't just corporate buzzwords. They are the absolute foundation of what they call trustworthiness of AI in defense. For the alliance, maintaining control over one's own AI, ensuring interoperability between allied nations, and validating that systems act strictly within international humanitarian law,
those are non-negotiable. NATO is essentially trying to ensure that as AI scales to process data and recommend actions, the systems always remain transparent, legally compliant, and ultimately accountable to a human operator.
But there is a chilling gap between carefully crafted ethical frameworks and the terrifying potential of true autonomous warfare. Military researchers define the ultimate extreme of this as human out of the loop. This is a state where autonomous systems coordinate themselves, form swarms, and engage threats entirely based on their own artificial cognitive processes without any direct human supervision. Defense organizations like DARPA are already envisioning mosaic warfare, where a tapestry of interconnected platforms delivers massive firepower. The U.S. Marines are even developing robotic war balls to storm enemy beach defenses. The underlying problem? An attack of this blinding speed and coordination can only be defended against by systems that operate equally fast with absolute autonomy and intelligence. It feeds a dangerous, almost uncontrollable race to total automation at machine speed.
The overarching strategic risk here is incredibly profound. While NATO meticulously validates its ethical AI systems, strictly requiring them to be transparent, human-supervised, and predictable, potential adversaries might ruthlessly pursue a hyper-war advantage by delegating lethal authority entirely to the machines. NATO's own Science and Technology Organization notes that adversaries are intensely testing AI in ways that completely run counter to Western ethical values. They might embrace what analysts call risk-free warfare, becoming so intoxicated by the idea of tireless autonomous weapons that they allow machines to make incalculable, unpredictable battlefield decisions without a single human constraint.
Which brings us to the ultimate dilemma. I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. As NATO spends $40 billion to technologically rebuild its defenses, localize its supply chains, and train thousands of new operators, can its stringent, human-centric ethical standards withstand a future battlefield where the enemy freely allows machines to make the final, fatal decisions? The future of global deterrence may depend not just on who builds the most advanced drone, but on who can connect, adapt, and govern these machines without losing their humanity in the process. Thank you for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you in the next one.